Welcome back to another video. Today we are reviewing the new Sony FX30. This is the new camera in the cinema camera lineup that they have, sitting probably just below the FX3, and it actually is extremely similar to the FX3, albeit with an APS-C sensor. Now, before we get into any of that, I'm actually shooting all of these talking head segments on the FX30 because I've been out and about, to test autofocus, dynamic range, image stabilization, all that kind of stuff. But it's also useful to get a shot like this, a talking head shot or an interview shot, because that's a lot of the kind of stuff this camera will be used for will be that side of things as well. So it's useful to kind of test this out. So all of these talking head shots, in fact, everything in the video except for shots of the FX30 has been shot on the FX30. Now, like I said, this is an APS-C sensor camera. It's kind of like an APS-C version of the FX3. So it's coming in quite a bit cheaper, but otherwise it feels very, very similar. Now, of course, there's advantages, there's disadvantages of having an APS-C sensor, but for a lot of people shooting video, which of course this is very much a video camera, actually, APS-C sensors can be quite useful. They allow you a little bit more room for error when it comes to depth of field, and you can still get a very nice cinematic shot with a very nice kind of blurred out background by using a nice wide open aperture, but it just allows you just that little bit more room for error when it comes to that. Whereas full frame, you often are getting a very, very shallow depth of field when you're using something like f1.4, which can be a little bit more tricky. Doesn't mean it's worse, doesn't mean it's better. Just interesting to think about. And for a solo shooter, such as myself, which is what I always feel like the FX3 and the FX30 are kind of aimed at, it always kind of feels good to me to be able to have that slight little room for adjustment there, which I really like. I appreciate that. So I like the APS-C sensor on this camera. Now, it's a new sensor, it's 26 megapixels, although it's 20 megapixels in the 16:9 part that we're of course using to film these videos. And that means that you're getting very nice, highly detailed 4K. It's actually oversampled from 6K, so you're getting really good detail there. And it looks great. Of course, you can shoot in 422 10-bit like I am right now. And with 4K, you can shoot up to 120 frames a second as well. So you can get some nice slow motion. That's something I would have expected from this camera. So it's good to see that it is delivered. You also have full HD up to 240 frames a second, which is great as well. But I think for most people, that 4K 120 really fits into the workflow really well. And for the kind of person who might be using this camera, so content creators, videographers who are going out making promo videos for businesses and stuff like that, it's going to be very, very useful. When I do promo videos, I shoot a lot at 120 frames a second or at 60 frames or 50 frames a second. And actually being able to do that in 4K just opens up a lot more avenues for cropping in post, for adding a bit of a zoom in post, lots of things that you can do, which I always appreciate. So that's a nice thing to see on the camera. You can also do 16-bit RAW external output through the HDMI port, which is great. It's great to have that available in the camera. It's not something I would use all the time, but it's great to have it because when you want that extra detail, so you can do some really nice color grading or really get the shot to look exactly how you would like to in post, it's a great thing to have available to you. Now, before we get into any of the other kind of spec of the camera, we should really talk about the price and the accessibility of the camera. This is coming in at a much cheaper price than the FX3, which I think is really important because this is a seriously good video camera for content creators, for YouTubers, for people doing videography professionally, or just kind of really wanting to push it and go from kind of semi-pro or just learning up to a really solid video camera. And because of that APS-C sensor, this really does feel like a much more accessible option maybe than the FX3. I actually think that if I was going to pick one myself, I probably would buy the FX30 just because it is a cheaper price point, so I could spend more money on lenses and things like that, and it still delivers exactly what I would want from a camera like this. Now, of course, there's loads of lenses available for this mount. A lot of them are going to be full frame lenses, but that's fine as well. You can still adapt. 50mm becomes more like an 85mm. A 24-70 becomes just a little bit longer, but I think it's still totally workable. And there's definitely some APS-C lenses which are going to work really well with this camera. In terms of actual video spec, there's a lot of stuff you would probably expect in here, but we've got things like S-Cinetone giving you the same color science used in the Venice 2. We've got new log shooting mode, so we've got Cine L, which gives you a great balance between strong and low light. Cine L Quick, which automatically switches the base ISO. And we have dual base ISO in this camera, which gives you better low light performance and better high ISO performance as well, which is really useful for, again, a solo shooter, someone out doing these videos who maybe doesn't have the time. I've definitely been there with clients where I don't have time to set up loads of lighting and get things perfect. And so being able to bump that ISO up always helps a little bit. It's something you're probably used to at this point. You know, a lot of cameras are very good at that now, but it's nice to see it in this camera. You can also apply user LUTs to the monitor. So you've got 3 presets available to it and 16 user LUTs. You know, if you're shooting in log, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to fully visualize how that's gonna end up looking. So being able to apply the LUT straight to the screen is fantastic. Now, talking of the screen, it's a fold out, flip out screen. So for example, right now I can see myself in the screen to make sure that I'm in frame, to make sure it's all recording properly. There's also a tally light on the front and the back of the camera, so I can make sure I know it's recording. So I, right now, have a tally light on, and I can see a frame around the actual monitor, which is red, to let me know I am recording. If I was behind the camera, I'd have obviously that frame around the screen, but I'd also have another light to let me know it is recording. So a really nice kind of all bases covered situation there, where you're definitely gonna know that it is or isn't recording. Now, the autofocus is definitely worth talking about. I'm just using wide tracking autofocus, so it's just tracking my face, my eye, whatever it can pick up around the frame. Admittedly, I'm not moving that much, but with Sony autofocus, you know, at this point, it's so reliable and so dependable. It's actually kind of crazy how good it is. So I never really have to think much when it comes to Sony with autofocus. I just know it's gonna do exactly what I want it to do. And it's really, really easy. If you're shooting yourself, if you're filming someone else, it's so easy to let the camera do all of the heavy lifting and do all the work. So this camera has of course got eye tracking, face tracking, but it also can do subject detection for humans, animals, and birds, which we don't see on the FX3. Which is a great addition, I think, because if you are out shooting wildlife or shooting birds or whatever it might be, that's a really nice thing to have available to you in the camera. So we've also got image stabilization in the camera. Now, this is actually really quite good. I was using this camera pretty much exclusively handheld, except of course for this shot now where it's on a tripod, but I was using the handle that you can get with the camera to sit on top. Now, I was really impressed by the handle on the FX3. I thought it worked really well for an additional kind of shooting grip. I was using this yesterday with the FX30, and I've got to say it works really, really well. The image stabilization works really nicely. I was walking, I was running, I was moving fast, moving slow. I really wanted to kind of test it out, see how it performs, but it looks good. It looks really good. And I think being able to shoot handheld with this is absolutely on the table, no problem at all. I would absolutely feel comfortable doing that. And then of course you can pop it on a gimbal if you want those extra smooth cinematic shots. With the handle actually on top of the camera, and it's attached with 2 XLR inputs as well, this really feels like an all-in-one video system, right? You've got audio covered with XLR inputs. Of course, there's a mic input on the camera as well. You've got the flip out monitor, which actually looks really good because you can apply LUTs to it. It works really well as a monitor for your video. You know, if you were filming yourself, you just spin it all the way around to be able to see yourself. The camera just works as a very good all-in-one system. But what I like about this, again with the FX3 as well, is it's got the actual screw threads all around the camera. So there's lots of different points that you could mount a light to it, a microphone. Of course, you've got a mic holder on the handle as well. So that's really, really helpful for those kind of run and gun, shotgun mic shoots. But there's lots of places that you can attach things to the camera. So you don't really need a cage with this kind of setup, which is easier to then dismantle or build up the whole rig depending on how you want to shoot on that particular occasion. Also, as a kind of solo shooter, single all-in-one system, it's quite comfortable as well. You've got a nice grip on the actual body, you've got the handle, which feels good. The whole thing just is kind of very ergonomic in the way it's designed, and I really like that. Of course, you've got microphone input, headphone input, USB-C, HDMI out, everything you would probably expect from a professional video system like this, and that's really what this feels like, as a professional video system that is much more accessible to kind of everyone. It's actually a very, very capable camera, but just at a much more accessible price point. And I couldn't recommend this enough, to be honest. You know, yes, you don't have a full frame sensor, but I just don't know that that matters as much for video to me as it does for photography. And even then, APS-C is great. It's a great system to use. And really this camera, if you're either a solo shooter, you know, a videographer shooting promo videos, doing interviews, doing talking heads, a YouTuber, this camera is really gonna last you a long time. There's a lot here which is just fantastic. It's really future-proofed, and it's gonna give you extremely good quality video for a long, long time. Now, of course, you can check out the FX30, all the spec, all the details, all the pricing by following the link down in the description, so you can check everything out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. So we've got new reviews, new tutorials, new everything all the time. I will, of course, see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.